Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. Um, Last night I did a special show where I reviewed a movie I just bought, and it is Zombie from 1979. It was directed by my favorite director, favorite figure in all of horror, my favorite horror director, Lucio Fulci. Just amazing. I did it right after I finished the movie, and so I've been changing things up a little bit. I did a review recently of the Voyage of the Last Demeter, and I did that review like as soon as I got home. So I've been kind of changing things up when I do them, and those are both done like relatively late at night. I typically do these videos during the in the morning time, so I don't know, always trying to change things up, but I'm pretty happy with how those both of those videos came out. So the new show I just uploaded by where I talked about Zombie from 1979. Just such a masterpiece. I was so blown away by watching that again, and I had never seen it on Blu-ray before, and it was amazing. After seeing it as a kid when on during the days of VHS, and then even seeing it on cable, mostly VHS, and I had seen it on DVD a few times, but never got a chance to see it on Blu-ray, and just blown away by what a masterful movie that is. And so with this channel, I try to do some specialty shows. I'm trying to always like mix things up and talk about things that are on the side to a degree of you know straight up film reviews. They're all the topics are obviously all related to film, and then how those things are tied to music. Things for me, inspirations that movies give me, for writing music and all those things, and how I feel they're so interconnected. But I try to do these specialty shows and try to mix things up. So today's show, I wanted to talk about kind of where the Friday the 13th franchise is, and just sharing my thoughts on it. The Friday the 13th franchise is by far, hands down, my favorite horror franchise of all time. I, you know, I was raised on that franchise. They were the series was created by Sean Cunningham and Victor Miller. Sean Cunningham was the director and developed some of the story. Victor Miller was the screenwriter for the first Friday the 13th. Those guys established such an incredible franchise that was it's kind of unparalleled. And to a degree, even though it's been many years since there's been any new movies, um, I think the fan base as a whole is bigger than ever. I think there's more of a demand for it. The audience is bigger now. There's been all of these like video games that have come out since then, and I was just thinking about and all of the things surrounding the lawsuit that's been going on for years, and it was recently just settled. There was this big major lawsuit between Sean Cunningham and Victor Miller over the rights of the franchise, basically, and it was settled. I believe Victor Miller came out as more of the victor, where he now has creative control with the company, if you will. And it was announced about maybe a month or two after the settlement, after the court case was over. It was announced that Victor Miller is going to work with A24, which is a big company in the world of horror. They tend to work on films that, well, a lot of people call them, a lot of the films that they put out as more like art house films. And I can understand that term. They don't typically put out. They take a lot of directors on and they release films that essentially are like kind of independent films, and a lot of the films are not like your paint by number Hollywood, you know, products. They're usually a little bit interesting, a little bit different. They do kind of have this European flair to them, and they harken back to a lot of the films in the '70s to a degree. So they're not always conventional, and they do allow their directors that they work with to take a lot of creative chances. I think one really major example of that is Ari Aster, who is such an amazing director, of course, from directed Hereditary, Midsummer, and then more recently, Beau is Afraid, which I haven't seen. I've heard that movie is totally bonkers. So, and he's as a filmmaker, he's definitely a risk taker. So A24 gets behind filmmakers that do those kinds of things. Robert Edgers, they've worked with Robert Edgers, and so you know, they take some risks, but I like that they at least take some risks and you know put films in the marketplace that you know probably say 10 or 15 years ago wouldn't have had a chance to be so. But it was announced shortly after the lawsuit was over that Victor Miller, who is the writer of the original Friday 13th, was going to be in partnership with A24 and also Peacock, which Peacock is a online streaming company, and that they were going to create a Friday 13th TV show, and that the storyline was going to take place around, I don't know the actual specifics, but that the storyline was going to take place more or less around the very first Friday 13th and then the second one. And it was going to be a little bit more of an origin story of like who Jason Voorhees was as a kid, Jason's mom, kind of the family dynamic and all those things. So it was announced that, and the lawsuit I believe was settled in January of this year, so it's been a while. But I keep hearing about it. I've been hearing more about it more and more, so I just wanted to do this kind of show on it because it is my favorite franchise. And I don't know, I have very mixed things about that. I have, Peacock is a big studio that now is doing what a lot of other streaming services is doing, where they're doing original content. There are some good examples of that. I think the first time I ever came across a company doing an original production was they worked with Martin Scorsese on The Irishman a few years back, which is an amazing movie. And then they also released and financed the new Hellraiser movie, which came out, or Hulu. Hulu was the company that put that out. And there's so many companies now. There's Hulu, there's Disney Plus, Peacock, Netflix, all these things. And Netflix did Irishman, and then Hulu released the Hellraiser remake, which is actually really good. Both those movies are really good, and so I was impressed. But the other thing about, well, the reasons I have talked about this before, but the reasons I don't use streaming is it's really a quality thing for me. I feel like there's a certain technology involved for them to be able to stream movies, where people can have access through their various, electronic gadgets to watch the movies through their TV or their phone or their watch, whatever the hell it is. But there's a certain kind of technology that they use, and again, I don't know the very specifics of it, but where they have to kind of compress everything. So everything, I've always felt that, movies are about escaping. Movies are about, hopefully, if it's a good experience or a great experience, hopefully it's going to transport you and take you out of the mundane for a few hours. And it's all about immersion. And I feel like the way the technology is through streaming is you're as a fan or as a viewer, you're not getting that experience because of the compression, the sound, everything is kind of compressed in this box. The color scheme seems to be off. The pixelation seems to be off. When you have examples of that is like when you have, say, a movie where it might have some scenes of where there's a lot of darkness in the literal sense. It's almost too dark. You can't really see it. I had that experience when I watched Hereditary through a Netflix. Or I watched it at a friend's house. We watched it through their Netflix account. When it got to scenes of where there's lots of darkness, I couldn't see anything, and I felt like the music, the score is so great in that film. Everything felt like it was all compressed, and um, there was no dynamic range anymore. So, and I've seen Christopher. I saw an interview recently with Christopher Nolan, who's one of the greatest filmmakers around. He just released Oppenheimer, and he was talking. I thought it was pretty cool. He was talking about that very same thing in an interview recently, and and why he is like super steadfast that he creates his work, his art, with having to go see it in the theater and having that immersive experience. He says people don't get that when you're streaming things at home because of those very same things. And I thought that was interesting. I will say that it's probably gotten better. I think when I watched Hellraiser last year, I feel like it was better, but it was still the same thing. I wanted to see it in the theater. I was still like, I want to buy a physical copy of it. I want to see it on Blu-ray, but there has not been any talk or news of it being released. So it's weird. But Peacock is going to be financing this new series, evidently, and I'm so bad. I There's a lot of amazing television shows out there, but I'm really bad about staying up on them. There's some television shows that I really, really love, but the problem that I end up having most of the time is just how time consuming they are and how some of these shows go on for multiple seasons. And you're talking years of investment. And I just don't have that attention span. And I notice when I get into a television show, and maybe after 4 seasons or whatever, I'm like, or less than that, I get fatigued. Even if I really like the show and I'm into it, I just get this like crazy fatigue that settles in, and I'm just like, okay, I want it to end. I don't want to keep waiting and have the cliffhanger come along, and it's got to put the hooks in me, and then I got to see it and continue to watch it for the next 5 years. I like the one and done shows. True Detective, the first season, pretty much the best television show ever. The Unabomber, Manhunter, one and done, just fantastic. But most television shows go on, and so that's one reason I probably. And then the other thing is I don't use streaming, so when this new series comes out, which I believe it's supposed to come out in um, next year, probably in the springtime or maybe wintertime. Um, I will, if I see it, it will have to be on like DVD or Blu-ray, and it will be probably years until that happens. So I probably won't ever even actually see it. On one hand, I think it's really exciting that there's something going on and there's some movement going on now that the lawsuit's done. But I don't know. Like, it's hard to believe that the last Friday the 13th movie came out about 15 years ago, 14 years ago, and it was directed by Marcus Nispel. I actually like him quite a bit as a director. He also did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie from 2003, which I was late to the game with that movie. I thought it was okay when I first saw it, and it's grown on me to now where I think it's an amazing movie. I love that movie to death. He also directed the last Friday the 13th movie, which is actually really, really good. And I think he's a rare breed, Marcus, as a director, Marcus Nispel, because he works for uh, New Line Cinema, big huge budget studio, and he essentially remakes these exploitation movies is what they are. I mean, I kind of consider them both to be these low budget kind of horror exploitation movies, the original Texas and the original Friday. Um, and he's able to strike that balance of like obviously there's a huge production value, but yet he's able to keep those films still really gritty and kind of dirty and rough. And story wise, I think he's able to like tie in the previous movies and various storylines in with what he's doing, but then he's also able to give you something new and take it into different directions. So it's not just a stale remake of something or a stale retelling of an idea that's already been out there. So he's kind of a rare breed. I think he's a good director or a great director in a lot of ways. And Friday the 13th has an amazing history because the original one, that was kind of the first, more or less, the first kind of horror exploitation movie that got the backing of a major studio, and it was through Paramount Pictures. And when that movie came out, it was a phenomenon. Like, it made millions of dollars, and it obviously changed movie history a lot. But then it also, like, changed horror. It spawned all kinds of other, gritty horror exploitation movies. And that movie, Friday the 13th, also took all of its ideas and concepts from movies like, Halloween or like Black Christmas, a lot of other movies, slasher movies that came out before that. And, but it changed history forever of cinema, especially in horror. And, it's my favorite franchise. I really want to see, I'd love to see some new movies. I think it would be awesome. And especially after the last one, which came out 14 years ago, which is hard to believe. That one was one of the biggest, or that one was the biggest in the entire franchise. Like, it set records. Like, it made millions of dollars. The other one that was huge was it's a spin-off movie, but Freddy vs. Jason. Another movie that I think is just so awesome. I reviewed all of those movies, the entire franchise, last year. And that movie also made a tremendous amount of movie and tremendous amount of money. It was huge, huge. And so, and there's been obviously a lot of demand since then because there was talk of them doing more movies and it just hasn't happened. I think it's cool and interesting that they're going to be doing a TV series, but I'm not like, I want to see a new movie. I want to see some new content out there as far as a movie goes. That would be really cool. And I think, if they do it well, I think they've done it pretty well. They have a pretty good formula that they stick to, and yet they're pretty good about the franchise as a whole, changing things up, keeping it kind of interesting, but super funny and campy too at the same time and ridiculous. I think there's a lot of things they could do with it. So I'm hoping that this will change. There's been rumors that Sean Cunningham will possibly direct another movie in the Friday 13th, but those are all rumors. The only thing that is confirmed is that Victor Miller is doing this TV show, and I believe it's like being filmed now or it's already been filmed, but that's the only thing that's like definitely happening. So we'll see. But I just wanted to do this show where I wanted to talk briefly about my favorite horror franchise of all time and kind of where it's at. And I've been thinking about it because I've been hearing, more and more about it recently. So, yeah, that's just what I want to do with the show. So, thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.